How the gentle wind beckons through the leaves as autumn.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were here already. Oh boy, here we go. I can't believe it's been nearly a decade since the release of Over the Garden Wall. I remember it was such an enigma whenever it aired live on Cartoon Network, but by the time it was playing on my TV, I would miss it since Gumball was taking up most of its airtime. So I don't really remember how I eventually found the show, but I probably just saw a clip of it on YouTube. It sparked my curiosity enough, and so I thought I'd give it a go. And holy shit, I fell in love with it. In case you don't know or remember what Over the Garden Wall is, let me give you a brief overview on the basic premise. Over the Garden Wall is a short miniseries that aired on Cartoon Network, only running for 10 episodes. The show wasn't cancelled or anything, it just conveyed everything it wanted to within that short amount of time, which is something I really appreciate Patrick McHale, the creator of the show, did, since he really cut all the crap and gave us no pointless filler, just straight up quality storytelling. So we're quickly introduced to both characters, Wirt and Greg. Wirt is the older brother, who's very clearly socially anxious and insecure about himself. He's kind of in that awkward phase where you try to be more confident than you actually are and it ends up backfiring horrendously. Yeah, kind of like that. Meanwhile, Greg is quite the opposite, being a lot younger, more bubbly, and optimistic about anything. And I mean anything. A living reminder to wear condoms, if you will. He's a character that I eventually warmed up to, but I just found him so annoying at first, which is ironic considering how the ending of the story made me feel, but I'm not there yet. We'll get to that, I promise. A lot of fans of the show are really hardcore, and I don't blame them. This show is truly phenomenal. It's definitely one of my favorite animated series I've ever watched, and for those reasons, it's a Christmas tradition of mine to watch it front to back every single time. Its beautiful animation, alongside the engaging folk-like narrative each episode focuses on, immerses you into this cozy little world. The soundtrack is also immaculate, and something I find myself revisiting a lot. One of my personal favorite songs is Patient is the Night, sang by Chris Isaak. It sounds so jazzy and way older than it actually is. Something Frank Sinatra could probably cook up. One of the things that surprised me as well about this show are the horror elements sprinkled throughout. You would not think this is a Cartoon Network show with some of the scenes they sneak up in here. If I was little old Timmy watching this back in 2014, this would have been my Teletubbies right here, bro. But enough glazing, let me tell you why Over the Garden Wall is the greatest animated short series of all time. The series begins with two half-brothers, Wirt and Greg, wandering through a mysterious forest known as the Unknown. Their personalities are quickly revealed as Greg yaps a bunch of random names that he claims to be terrible for his pet frog, and Wirt becomes a theater kid as soon as he realizes that they're lost in the woods, reciting his own words as some sort of spoken poetry. Shortly after, they're startled by the sound of a woodsman swinging his axe. Debating on whether they should ask him for directions, they're greeted by a talking bluebird, who we later on discover to be named Beatrice. Wirt is obviously confused as birds don't really talk in the real world. But before they get to speak any further, the woodsman finds the boys and warns them about this alleged beast. As an act of kindness, he allows them to stay inside an old mill for shelter. Wirt, still being skeptical, asks the woodsman what he does for work, which of course, as a woodsman, he turns wood into oil. That's what a woodsman does. But he does it to keep his lantern lit. Meanwhile, Greg, being the younger brother, has been leaving a candy trail this whole time, just for fun. Wirt thinks this guy is a nuthead and secretly talks to Greg about potentially knocking him out and making a run for it. He realizes this plan could very well go wrong afterwards, or should I say, after Wirt's. I'm sorry, that was fucking terrible. So he tells Greg to forget about it. However, the woodsman overhears them whispering and asks what all the fuzz is about. Luckily, Greg avoids telling him about the whole knocking him out part, but he explains that they were planning on leaving. The woodsman surprisingly wasn't bothered by the idea, as he once again warned them about the dangers that lurk in the forest and took off to do labor. Wirt, pondering upon his life and deep desires, tells Greg to go play with his frog so he could be left alone. Greg replies with his first out of many many to come, Rock Facts, which became a love segment from his character by many fans. As he roams around looking for his pet frog, he stumbles upon this dark giant creature with colorful vibrant eyes. Growling loud enough to capture the attention of Wirt and the woodsman, we see this creature break inside the mill. Thinking that it was the beast, both brothers began to panic. Unfortunately for Wirt, Greg still follows his old plan and knocks down the woodsman cold on the ground. While Wirt runs like a coward, he leaves Greg behind with the monster, a small detail that would become crucial to his character development later on. Apparently, the only thing this creature was after was Greg's candy trail, as he manages to tame the monster by throwing some sweets at it. With one more piece left to spare, Greg throws it from the mill's rooftop to the ground, having the mysterious creature trap itself within the water wheel, coughing out a small black turtle with a blue bow tie on its head. The bow tie looking very similar to Greg's piece of candy, so it makes sense as to why it attracted the monster. Speaking of which, Greg later found it on the lake in the shape of a regular dog, almost as if it was cursed or something. Wirt still believes they had defeated the beast and once again blames Greg for the destruction of the mill. However, he's quickly confronted by the woodsman when he's told that he should assume responsibility as the older brother. Both brothers walk off into the distance in their continuous search to leave the unknown, unsure where to go next but determined to find a way home. And that concludes chapter 1. The pilot episode usually starts off pretty slow for most series, but don't worry, the show gets pretty juicy quick. On their journey back home, they stumble across a sign that reads, Pottsfield 1 mile. Meanwhile, Wirt is excited about the discovery of a nearby town. Greg finds Beatrice, remember her, stuck amongst the vines inside a bush, promising him that if he manages to release her free, she'll owe him a favor later on. Greg comedically mistakes her for a magical genie, and so after wishing to be turned into a tiger, she's set free. She promises both Wirt and Greg to take them to meet this woman named Adelaide, who could possibly show them their way back home. Wirt refuses to listen to a talking bird and heads over to Pottsfield as planned. After finally making it to the town, the place seems empty and deserted. Eventually, they find this barn full of pumpkin people seemingly celebrating some sort of tradition. Wirt gets questioned about why he's there as he doesn't exactly fit in with the crowd, and so he tells the pumpkin lady that he and his brother are just trying to find a way out. This for some reason really upsets all the pumpkin people, and so they awaken the king. As a punishment for the interruption of their ceremony, they're assigned a few hours of manual labor, which is perfectly fine with Wirt. During a short montage, in the background we can hear my favorite song off this entire soundtrack. I briefly mentioned it, but in case you forgot, the song is called Patient is the Night. It really adds to the entire atmosphere of the show, and for many of us, this particular scene is what had us falling in love with it in the first place. After almost clocking out of their shift, Greg digs up a skeleton buried right underneath them, leading Wirt to believe that they're digging their own grave. When the pumpkin people arrive, Beatrice tells him to stall in order to plan an escape. Although Wirt did a terrible job at stalling, it seemed to buy Greg and Beatrice enough time to set themselves free. Beatrice helped both brothers escape Pottsfield, but there weren't any signs of imminent danger, therefore she was still technically indebted to them. And that's how she ended up becoming part of the gang. Yeah, the fucking, what you might call it, the Fred gang.
Fred, you go left. Foxy, you take the right. Bonnie, you know what to do.
Greg is singing along the road and really starts to irritate Beatrice. Let me say, by the way, this song is catchy as f***. Ever since revisiting the show, I have not been able to get it out of my head. Anyways, this makes her go on a tangent about Wirt being a pushover, and tells Greg that he should be more like him in that regard. Obviously, this doesn't sit well with Wirt, and so he begins to act like a complete easy meat. Beatrice notices Greg is gone as we see him wander off to quote-unquote make the world a better place. With both Wirt and Beatrice after him, they stumble across what appears to be a school for younglings. The teacher mistakes them for regular students, and so Wirt, wanting to piss off Beatrice, decides to take a seat. The teacher ends up singing about her ex-husband Jimmy Brown, who apparently, I don't know, some shit about a gorilla, which ironically enough, Greg and his rebellious school friends encounter while playing a game of Fetch the Old Cat, which is exactly what it sounds like, by the way. Running for their dear lives, they cartoonishly hold on to the school bell. Because of this, the teacher sends the student in for lunch, and oh my god, why does the series have so many bangers? After a depressing meal at the cafeteria, Greg has the idea to add molasses to his tasteless mashed potatoes. And of course, he sings about it. I'm not sure if I can play the song due to copyright, but it goes crazy, trust me. I was also thinking, hasn't it been 2 days since both Wirt and Greg have been lost? Like, I don't know what the hell they've been eating in the middle of the woods, but I'm not gonna lose sleep over analyzing it. The teacher's father walks in and interrupts this whole performance, threatening to shut down the school if her daughter doesn't comply. All the students are forced to go to bed, but Greg still believes he should save everybody from their misery. Convincing Wirt to sneak out, they find the teacher's father laying behind a bush, monologuing himself to sleep about his crippling debt. So I feel you on that one, man. Please subscribe. So Greg takes matters into his own hands and steals back the instruments that were taken from them. He uses them as tools to raise money for the school, and everybody lives happily ever after.
Psych.
There's still a huge gorilla on the loose, but don't you worry, as Wirt tumbles over his untied shoe and brings down the gorilla with him. We come to find out it was this Jimmy Brown guy the entire time, stuck in a gorilla suit like it's some sort of Scooby-Doo crossover episode. I'm not gonna lie, some of these segments were hard to follow, like who is Jimmy Brown and why should I care about him? But regardless, this was a fun little side plot line that I didn't mind at all. That pretty much wraps up chapter 3. During some stormy weather, Greg, Wirt, and Beatrice are hiding from the beast in a pile of hay. Holding on to the back of a truck, the driver seems to be paranoid, as he keeps repeating over and over again, "The beast is upon me." Kind of zestily, I'm not gonna lie. As thunder strikes, the Shire horse panics and takes a sharp turn, causing them to be thrown off the carriage into a field. They then see an eerie tavern up ahead and attempt to ask for directions from the people inside. We also get to see the woodsman creep up behind them pretty ominously. Like, what you up to there, buddy? When they enter the tavern, the ambiance is accompanied by some jazz folk tunes playing in the background. Beatrice gets kicked out by an old hag with a broomstick, thinking that bluebirds bring bad luck. So as she makes her way out, she leaves Wirt in charge of getting directions, although the only thing he got was an identity crisis. The old lady asks the boys who they are, as well as introduces them to everyone in the room. Essentially, the whole town seems to be there, the stereotypical butcher, baker, candle...
See, we're trying to get to...
I'm the highwayman.
Okay, good to know. Well, so you see...
All of a sudden, the camera pans towards some guy who calls himself the Highwayman. He plays little to no
Significance.
to the show after singing his little jingle, but I thought it'd be fun to mention. Wirt tries to explain that he's looking for Adelaide, but the people from the tavern mistake this for Wirt wanting to hook up with a chick named Adelaide, so the people break into song, as one does of course, with the lyrics explaining to Wirt how to get bitches. Meanwhile, Beatrice flies away to go find the woodsman to ask him for directions. Wirt finally grabs the people's attention with a goofy song about his lost travels. The people dub him a pilgrim, someone who determines their own destiny. They become extremely fascinated with his adventures in running from the beast, and they sing about it. Again, the people inform Wirt that the person who carries the lantern is the beast, which obviously confuses him even more since the woodsman is the person who carries the lantern. Wirt heroically mounts the horse after they hear Beatrice scream from a distance, picking up Greg and stumbling across the woodsman with Beatrice lying on the ground next to him. This gives Wirt the impression that he's turning her into an Edelwood tree. Assuming that the woodsman must be the beast, instead of fleeing in terror, Wirt blows out his own lantern to blind the woodsman in the dark. Wirt grabs his leg to stall him off so Greg can get a hold of Beatrice. The woodsman quickly snatches Wirt for a brief moment to warn him that the beast is upon them, indicating that the beast is not actually the woodsman, of course. Wirt doesn't believe him and knocks down his lantern, causing the Edelwood tree to burn down in flames. When Beatrice finally wakes up, she realizes that the horse she spoke to could actually talk back, and his name is Fred. I guess he just didn't like her. Anyways, the episode ends with the woodsman speaking to the real beast. We learn that his lantern carries the soul of his daughter, and the beast is somehow behind all of it. Sorry. Now it's after Wirt and Greg. Again, probably the darkest premise I've seen from a Cartoon Network show. But this episode was super lore heavy, so I hope you're listening. Mad Love begins with Wirt, Greg, Beatrice, and a rich guy named Quincy having a feast in a mansion. Oh yeah, and Fred is also still there. Beatrice told the brothers to pretend to be this crazy guy's nephew in order to steal some money from him. They need 2 cents in order to ride a ferry to Adelaide's pasture. He clearly has some sort of mental problem that she wants to take advantage of, so you can't help but to feel bad for the poor guy. Well, not poor, he's filthy rich. Wird's completely against the idea until they tell him how little the amount they'd steal would actually be. Again, 2 cents. It could actually turn into a lot of money if you invest into crypto. Quincy starts sweating, almost as if something was bothering him. He starts acting hella sus when Greg questions him for behaving that way. And so we learn that Quincy fell in love with the painting of a woman he's never seen before. He didn't even know he had it in his mansion. That's how fucking big it is. Quincy then takes Greg and the horse to see the painting while the rest of the crew snoops around for moolah. Although their clumsy asses keep knocking expensive things over. If that's not bad enough, Beatrice and Wirt accidentally lock themselves in a closet because they mistake the bird pecking on the window as Quincy being back. While in the closet, Beatrice reveals to Wirt that she used to be a human, but the comment is quickly brushed over when they realize that they can't get out of the closet. Meanwhile, Quincy shows Greg the greenhouse room of the mansion and freaks out when a peacock jumps through the glass window. He seems increasingly paranoid and is actively trying to avoid showing Greg the painting, for whatever reason. Beatrice is also trying to avoid something, answering Wirt's questions about how she became a bluebird. They then stumble upon a secret entrance within the closet that leads to another room. Once they enter the room, Beatrice finally admits that she unintentionally cursed herself and her family by throwing a rock at a bluebird.
You should have known better.
Moved by her confession, Wirt feels comfortable enough to share things with Beatrice. He shares that he has a crush on a girl as well as other regular teenage stuff. Not really much of a juicy confession. Wirt suddenly points out that the room they entered is not the same design as the rest of the mansion, which leads him to a conclusion about the ghost girl that Quincy is in love with. Before we find out what Wirt is thinking, it cuts to Quincy and the others arriving at the room with the mysterious painting. After seeing some broken things on the floor, the horse abruptly accuses Quincy of murdering the lady of the house and pretending to own it. Quincy then has an insane look on his face and realizes that they're after his money. Before he can do anything about it, he folds as he sees the woman he's forever yearned for enter the room, in the flesh. Both Quincy and the woman pass out. They awake shortly after and realize that their mansions are so damn big that they're actually connected. It's love at first sight, you could almost cry. But I won't, because men don't cry. Pussies cry. Do you cry in the comments? If you cry, you're a pussy. I'm kidding. I cry all the time. I'm crying right now. I'm gonna cry after this video because I'm gonna go back to my reality, my fucking regular ass life. And the crew leaves safely and Fred stays behind as he's offered the position of a tea horse, whatever that means. So we never get to see him again. All seems well until Greg literally throws the 2 cents that they needed into the fountain for no fucking reason. That settles it. I have a new agenda against Greg. As the title suggests, the episode starts off with the gang hitching a ride on a boat with a bunch of froggies smoking pipes. Wirt and Greg feel relieved and assume that their journey to see Adelaide is finally coming to a close. However, Beatrice doesn't appear to share their excitement for some reason. Trouble arises yet again when they get busted for not paying for the boat ride. Because, you know, somebody... Gregory thought it was a good idea to throw away the money. As they're running away from the frog police, they bump into a baby stroller and proceed to slip on tadpoles. I know this scene isn't relevant to much, but it's just hilariously vile. They retreat into a storage room and change into a disguise in which Wirt covers his whole body with his cloak and Greg puts his pet frog on his head. Greg's disguise is literally a drum, so he blends in perfectly with the other bands. When Wirt accidentally knocks down the bassoon player overboard, the frogs go into a frenzy. To calm the frogs Whoa, what happened to my voice there? To calm the frogs down, Wirt attempts to play the bassoon, and all is well again. For the most part, Greg's pet frog, who still shall remain nameless, cause ain't no way in hell I'm gonna call him all 9 names. He starts singing, as frogs do obviously, and it really does add a nice touch. Suddenly, the cloak falls off of Wirt, but nobody seems to care because of the frog's soothing voice. Bro's built just like me for real. The song he's singing also includes the lyrics "Over the Garden Wall," which, they said the thing! It's now nighttime and the boat finally docks. Beatrice pushes off the idea of going to Adelaide's house, saying that they should probably just sleep next to the frogs and walk there in the morning instead. They sit around a fire and talk throughout the night until they fall asleep. It actually sounds really freaking nice. Like, imagine just like in a campfire with your friends and stuff, and then you just like talking until you fall asleep. Like, that actually sounds like some Animal Crossing type shit. Okay, cut this whole segment off. That was not funny. Wirt and Greg are awakened when they hear Beatrice fly away in the middle of the night. Not sure how they heard her fly, but I guess they're both light sleepers. Beatrice flies into Adelaide's house, and we learn that she may not be as nice as she seems, having made a deal with Adelaide that she would find lost children and bring them to her in return for the curse to be lifted off of her and her family. Because Beatrice has become attached to the boys and feels they deserve to go back home, she begs Adelaide to reconsider. Adelaide is a mean old witch who wants her child servant. Beatrice feels so badly for the boys that she offers to become Adelaide's servant instead. Wirt and Greg then enter the house and become trapped in a bunch of strings that Adelaide had set up. They both feel betrayed, of course, and Adelaide goes on about how she herself is essentially a servant to the beast and how this is all really his doing. Beatrice suddenly kills the mean old witch by opening the window because she can't breathe in the night air. The old lady melts to the ground, allowing Wirt and Greg to escape, leaving Beatrice behind, all alone sobbing. Wirt and Greg continue their journey in the dark, foggy woods. As thunder and rain strikes, Greg and Wirt attempt to find shelter. After the betrayal of Beatrice, Wirt is visibly frustrated. His energy is off and hope diminishes by the second. A tree falls down and startles them, come to find out that the woodsman chopped it down and is standing right there. As always, he warns them about the beast. He tells them that the only way the beast can take control of them is if they give up and lose hope on their journey. They don't really listen and take off in terror instead. The actual beast creeps around the corner, wanting to talk with the woodsman.
Come over here and kiss me on my hot mouth.
Meanwhile, Greg and Wirt find a house that they believe is abandoned, but is actually lived in by an evil woman and her niece. The niece tells the boys to hide as her auntie's about to come in. The creepy, ugly-ass auntie comes in and claims that she can smell the children. Kinda like Drake nowadays, am I right, fellas? She seems to hypnotize her niece with some bell and demands that she tells her where the children are. The woman, if you can call her that, looks inside the basket where Greg... I'm sorry. She looks inside the basket where Greg and Wirt are hiding, but they're buried under a bunch of black turtles, so she can't see them. The same black turtle that is seen in the pilot episode. Coincidence? I think not. She then goes upstairs off to bed after commanding her niece to clean the floor. The boys are able to come out from hiding, and Wirt offers to help the servant girl to get the work done quickly so that they can escape together. Bro's got that serviceable riz. There's no fucking way I just said that. While they're cleaning, Greg chases his frog up the stairs and it awakes the evil woman. Now here's a plot twist, where Greg and the niece flee into a room and lock the door. Turns out that the woman was trying to warn the boys about her niece all along. She's the evil one who eats the children. I mean, we should have known earlier since we saw that the woman's diet consisted of black turtles, but Greg seems unfazed, which is so funny because he's literally a small child. Anywho, the girl chases the boys outside, and then we come to find out that Greg's frog ate the magic bell that controls the girl. Wirt is able to use it to send the evil spirit out of the girl and save her, himself, and Greg. The auntie catches up with everyone and they're a happy family again. Of course, I'm talking about the auntie and the niece, not Greg and Wirt, obviously. Ironically, the auntie warns the boys of her sister, who happens to be Adelaide. As Greg and Wirt continue their adventure, Wirt starts to lose hope as the beast feeds off of his despair. We also learn that the woodsman only associates with the beast in order to keep his daughter's soul alive in his lantern. Like, what you doing if they put your ass in a lantern, bro? Like, you can be a genie without a wish. Plus, it's gotta be hot as hell.
You can take off your uniform, you know? Go ahead. I won't judge.
Starting off with a glimpse of Beatrice sitting on a branch in the fog, looking awfully worried. It pans off to the distance with Greg and Wirt floating in a box across the river. Wirt looks genuinely clinically depressed, while Greg still seems like his happy-go-lucky self. We can also hear the beast singing in the background in joy of Wirt's misery. When they get to land, Wirt admits that he's given up hope completely and believes that they'll never make it back home. The beast has him in the palm of his hand, or its hand. He lashes out at Greg and tells him that it's his fault that they got lost in the first place. Greg mistakenly interprets this as Wirt entrusting him with the role of getting them back home. They both drift off to sleep, laying against a tree. But before Greg goes to sleep, he wishes on a star to guide him home, which leads him to have a vivid dream.
This edible ain't shit.
The dream depicts him going to a place in the sky called Cloud City, alongside other little children and animals. He tells them that he wants to know how to be a good leader, so they let him lead their band in a cute little fun song. During the song, Greg accidentally bonks into a black gate with skulls on it, and this ominous gate opens. We meet this big dark cloud called the North Wind, and all of the townspeople seem afraid of him. Meanwhile, it's actually windy outside, so Wirt and Greg are shown shivering, trying to warm themselves up with piles of leaves. We also see that Beatrice is flying around trying to find them. She comes really close, but then gets scared off by an owl, so that never happened. Back in Greg's dream, he defeats the North Wind and comes out victorious by trapping him inside a bottle. Then the Queen of Clouds appears and grants Greg a wish in return for saving Cloud City. Naturally, Greg wishes for him and Wirt to be sent home. However, the Queen informs him that Wirt is too lost to be able to return home, and that he's turning into an Edelwood tree at the hands of the beast. Sadly, Greg blames himself for this, so he changes his wish to something else, as he whispers into the Queen's ear.
I've been married a long time ago.
We can only assume what he really says. Back to reality, Greg wakes up Wirt, apologizes to him, and is lured towards the beast. When Wirt hears the beast's voice, he awakens and immediately becomes worried about Greg, running around in paranoia, falling into a lake after he quite literally steps on some thin ice. I'm sorry, that's a bad time for a joke. Luckily, Beatrice throws a net into the water and manages to save Wirt. Yay. Confusingly, this episode begins with Wirt back in his bedroom at home. This ends up being sort of a prequel to the events that take place throughout the show. Wirt has a thing for some girl named Sarah, going as far as creating a mixtape for her with an audio of him reciting poetry and playing his clarinet. Sarah can be seen in a bee costume cheering for a football team as their mascot. Meanwhile, Wirt is anxiously standing outside of the fence. Greg shows up and takes the mixtape, thinking he's doing Wirt a favor by handing it over to Sarah. However, he ends up giving it to Sarah's friends, which, if you know anything about women, they don't play with their juicy gossip. They tell Wirt that someone called Jason Funderburker is planning to ask her out the same night. This guy's apparently the real deal, so Wirt freaks the fuck out, speaks gibberish, and flees. Him and Greg are then walking down the streets while Wirt once again gets in his theater kid bag, yapping away about his life problems until he finally realizes that he actually never took the mixtape back. When Greg and Wirt go back to find it, Sarah's friends say that they sneaked it inside of her jacket. Eventually, Wirt manages to bump into Sarah at a Halloween house party and gets invited to hang out at a spooky cemetery alongside a group of friends, of course, including Jason Funderburker. Despite denying the invitation, Wirt and Greg still follow. The cops show up, quote unquote, busting them. Anyways, everyone runs away despite the police officer just playing a sick joke for Halloween. Unfortunately, Wirt and Greg's path leads them to a dead end, leaving them with no choice but to climb up a tree and sit on top of a brick wall. Or should I say, over the From the top, they notice that Sarah found the mixtape in her jacket, and the popular guy Funderburker suggests that they listen to it together. Wirt assumes his life is over and proceeds to jump down on the opposite side of the graveyard.
Stop chewing gum! Nothing good comes from chewing gum, Johnny.
He starts yelling at Greg about how annoying he is and how him and his stupid dad ruined his life. Damn. This gives us some insight as to why Wirt seems irritated with Greg throughout the entirety of the show. I mean, high-key, Greg did cause the initial problem of taking Wirt's mixtape, but a lot of what led to them getting lost in the first place was just pure inconvenience. The boys then roll down a hill, trying to jump out of the way of an oncoming train. The flashback ends and we see Wirt and Greg's pet frog appear in a tree hole greeted by Beatrice's family. After being fed a spoonful of dirt, Wirt decides to continue his search for Greg.
Alright, we get it! How many times are you gonna play that stupid intro card?
I'm sorry, it's just part of the aesthetic.
Knock it off!
The final episode in the series depicts snow and harsh winds. We see Beatrice failing to reach Greg because of the current, leaving Greg alone with the beast. It appears that Greg has been gathering items for the beast as some sort of ritualistic method in exchange for his soul or something. But the last item he needs is the actual sun, placed in a little cup. Greg sets the cup down on a tree stump so that when the sun sets, it'll look like it's gone inside. He's told by the beast to sit there and wait outside in the freezing cold. Beatrice, due to the wind, then flies directly into Wirt, eagerly telling him that she saw Greg. Some of the sound effects they use for this are actually really funny as well. Like, they just sound like they looked up sound effect from YouTube and extracted it. Okay. Together, they continue their search for Greg. Meanwhile, the woodsman is doing everything he can to keep his lantern lit. After hearing the beast singing, he feels compelled to go into the woods in order to find him. Day turns to night, and the woodsman finds the beast as well as Greg, who's turned into an Edelwood tree by now. The woodsman is appalled at this sight, being completely unaware that the wood he had been using for so many years actually came from lost souls. The woodsman is actually a good man who just wanted to keep his daughter's spirit alive. He tries to free Greg and attacks the beast with his axe. Wirt and Beatrice finally find Greg, barely alive and now sick. Once they find him, we can also hear a theatrical take on the Potatoes and Molasses song. I'm still not 100% sure how I feel about it. It kind of takes you out of the immersion, but at the same time it's fucking awesome, so I don't know. So the beast suddenly appears and offers a deal to Wirt because Greg is too fragile to make it home and will most certainly die in the woods. He wants to put Greg's spirit in the lantern, the same deal he made with the woodsman for his daughter. And so Wirt is presented with a terrifying and heartbreaking decision. Right before he agrees to the deal, he abruptly steps back and changes his mind. He puts his thinking cap on and realizes that the soul that's actually in the lantern was the beast all along, which explains why he wanted to keep it lit forever. After figuring out how weak the beast actually is, Wirt ends up giving the lantern back to the woodsman, who is also surprised by this revelation, realizing that his little girl was actually never living inside the lantern. I'm sorry, but just imagine how incredibly devastating that must feel. For the majority of your life, you're thinking you're carrying your dead daughter's soul, when in reality you were just lied to by someone who already fucked up your life in the first place. Like, that's just bonkers. Wirt, Greg, and Beatrice leave the scene, finally able to continue their way home. Wirt also gives Beatrice something very unexpected. A magic scissors from Adelaide's house, remember? The ones that can turn her and her family back into humans, yeah. Wirt really would have let her stay a bluebird for eternity if they never patched things up. That's kind of crazy, I ain't gonna lie. We then see the woodsman have the courage to blow out the lantern, defeating the beast once and for all. Beatrice goes off to find her family. Meanwhile, Greg and Wirt are found by the people from the party and are taken to the hospital by an ambulance. They're nursed back to health and everyone's happy. Wirt even invites his crush Sarah to listen to the tape he made for her, which most likely wouldn't have happened if he wasn't forced to bear bigger problems. The end of the episode is filled with heartwarming scenes of everybody having a happy ending. Did I mention everyone's happy, by the way? The woodsman is reunited with his daughter, the auntie and the niece are happy in their home, Quincy is in love, the horse becomes a racehorse, and we see Beatrice and her family as humans once again. It fades out with the frog playing the piano and singing a soothing song, just like the intro for each episode of the show. Overall, I really don't see how anybody could hate on the show. I mean, it executes the idea perfectly and is visually stunning. The story is short and sweet, but also extremely dense with some pretty heavy topics such as grief and depression. Pretty much every video on my channel so far. But I really do love Wirt's character progression though. You can truly see him stepping outside of his comfort zone each and every episode. And not only does he become a better brother because of it, but he also quits being such an asshole in general, leaving these desires to be something that he's not and accepting himself for everything he already is. Also, brief intermission, but I think it's pretty cool because I didn't really know until the other day. But if you look over at the Wendigo folklore, it says some people are believed to be more susceptible to becoming possessed by a Wendigo, including those who are greedy or gluttonous, as well as those who are suffering from hunger or starvation. I didn't know about that at all. I'm just putting it here in case one of you didn't know either. Anyways, you see the runtime in this video. We're not done just quite yet because I decided, hey, this soundtrack is literally perfection, so it would only be fair for me to rank each song on a tier list. I don't know why I do this to myself, but let's go. The rules for this are, the song must contain lyrics. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Led through the mist.
Now, if you don't like this song, I think there's something wrong with you. I mean, this shit is an instant classic. It's the entry to whatever we see on the show, and it just sets the mood, sets the atmosphere, and it's perfect. It's poetic. It's fucking awesome. If your dreams can't come true, then why not pretend? Like, come on. I swear I'm not gonna be this flexible with every single song on the soundtrack, but this one just needs an S tier. Come on. I'm not gonna lie, I don't like this. It just like sounds kind of like medieval, and also I just can't resonate with any of it. There's no lyrics for me to hold on to. It's just, I don't know, it's just choir, gospel, or I don't even know if that's what it is. I'll give it a C tier right now. I don't know if I'll change any of these, but yeah, C tier right now. F tier, obviously. Nah, my hat, fuck. Patient is the Night. Obviously, y'all know my bias. I think this is the best song of the entire soundtrack. It's like Harvest Moon music. It's like Stardew Valley, and the lyrics are beautiful. It's an amazing song. It's obviously the one that I go back to the most. So, no doubt about it. You know what? We need a special ranking for this one. How about double S tier? Adelaide Parade is super wholesome. I really love this song. It's the first song where we hear both Wirt and Greg together. It just brings a smile to my face whenever I hear it. So I can't knock it down. And also the string arrangement at the end of the song, masterful, bravo. I'm gonna give it an A tier, to be honest. I feel indifferent about this one as well. Don't get me wrong, I don't think any of these songs are bad. I just didn't even care for the plot line of the whole Jimmy Brown or whatever. I think it was a pretty forgettable segment, and I can't say anything too different about this song. You know, it's there, it's good, you know, it's like objectively good, but I don't think I would ever revisit this again. It's not worse than Pottsfield CM, so I'm gonna move Pottsfield CM down to a D tier and then bump up what was it called? Langtry's Lament back in C tier. Come on, no discussion. S tier. I don't even have to explain why. It's just an iconic song. It's literally one of the best songs off the soundtrack. Of course, not better than Patient is the Night, but it's definitely up there. And actually, at first, I didn't like it because, you know, Greg's voice, you know, is not the best singer. But again, it's a soundtrack. It's not meant to be like a freaking Adele record. So I think it's excellent for what it is. So I'm gonna give it an S tier. It's perfect. I think it's a pretty cool song. I mean, I don't have a lot to say about it, but it's definitely a great way to tell the story of the Beast and who he is and stuff. I'm gonna put it in a safe B tier. I think it's a B tier, you know? It's essential to the story. It's an important song. So, yeah, B tier.
I'll knock you out.
Despite the song being a really short jingle, I think it's freaking awesome, especially with the animation sequence it goes along with. It's just, hold on, I gotta hold the mic for this. Mwah. It's not as good as an S tier song, but it's a solid A tier. So, oh my god, I'm sweating like a bitch. This is also from the same episode as The Highwayman and all those other songs, but again, not something super memorable or something that I will go back to a lot. I think the sequence is very fun, where they're basically kind of teaching how to dress up and all that stuff. But yeah, sonically, I don't think I would revisit this one as much. I'm gonna give it a C tier. This one's sang by the Little Froggy. I think it's really cute, honestly, and hilarious that he has such a masculine voice. More masculine than me. I'm gonna give it a solid A tier. Now, I watched this show a lot of times, but I don't recall hearing this song ever play in an episode. I don't know if it just didn't make the cut or what, but regardless, I don't know why, because this song is just as good as Patient is the Night. Should I put it alongside Patient is the Night? You know what? F*** it. I'm gonna do it. It's just as good as Patient is the Night, in my opinion. I don't think I ever really focused or paid attention to the song much when I was just letting the soundtrack play by. But oh my god, it's beautiful. And yeah, I think we're starting to make it to the songs that didn't actually make it on the soundtrack itself. Like, it's on the soundtrack, but not on like the official show. I'm gonna give it an A tier. Elijah Wood, he's an incredibly talented man. Let me say that. I mean, he has an incredible voice. And not only is he a voice actor, but he's a great singer. But yeah, A tier all day. I like this song too. Between the brass and the voice, it's just got such grit to it that just makes you want to do the stank face whenever you listen to it. It didn't blow my mind or anything, but I think it's still really good, so I'm gonna give it a B tier. Give this woman a Grammy. I know what I said about Pottsfield CM sounding a little like too gospel-y, and it is similar to this sort of track, but at the same time, it's really not. I mean, this one just has so much more power and emotion. That's in my humble opinion, of course, but I think the song is beautiful. It makes a grown man cry. A tier. If you're expecting an F tier in this tier list or something, I don't know what to tell you. It's not gonna happen, probably. I also used to listen to the song a lot, especially whenever I was going through it. It's a great song for that. If you're ever feeling down, listen to The Fight Is Over. The way he says, cold. Oh my god, it just does something to my body. And then the guitar solo at the end, give it an S tier, man. I'm not gonna lie, whenever this song started playing, I was like, what the hell am I listening to? Not because it was bad, but it was just way too different from the actual soundtrack itself. Like, in contrast to the old-timey feel, this sounds like way too modern with like synthesizers and stuff. Like, it just doesn't really make much sense here. It's not bad, but I don't think it has a place in the soundtrack. For those reasons alone, I'm gonna bump it down to C tier.
Come on now, young strangers.
I don't know, this song, again, objectively sounds good, but it's not really my style. It's not something I'm interested in, so it kind of ended up sounding pretty boring to me. It's well written, it's worth mentioning, but that's about it. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I'm gonna give it a D tier. This song sounds scary as hell, I ain't gonna lie. I dig it though. I mean, it's been an incredible influence on my musical journey as well. I just can't believe that it's straight up from a Cartoon Network show. I know I keep saying that, but it's just like, it sounds so dark and just morbid and deathly. It's just, I don't know, but it's a good song. A tier. I know I mentioned while I was covering the series that it kind of like shifted the tone a little bit from serious to very goofy for me, but I still think it's a really good song. It's epic, and I think the show does a really good job at making you care for Greg a lot more with this song, you know? It turns this childish little tune into something morbid, which is something that I said similarly to the previous song, but it's still really good. I'm gonna have to give it an A tier. I know I keep giving these A tiers, but I don't know what you want me to do. They're fucking excellent. If the intent of the song is to put me to sleep, then it worked perfectly. It's not really my favorite song, not something I'm gonna listen to either. I'm just gonna put it at a D tier. It's kind of sonically uninteresting as well. Unlike the last one, this isn't really boring. It's kind of relaxing, if anything. I could see myself sitting outside right now and just vibing out. I think it's a pretty good song. It's nothing amazing, nothing spectacular, but I'm gonna go ahead and give it a B tier. I don't got much to say about it, but it's another really good song. It's an A tier for sure. It is the equivalent of only Greg can do it. I think the only child I would hear sing is Greg. The other people just sound like they came straight from the fucking Elmo soundtrack. So I don't think I'm gonna be bumping that. I'm gonna give it a D tier. Yo, can someone tell the Beast he can't sing? Like, damn. Kind of mid, not gonna lie, but it is his iconic theme, so I'm not gonna give it a D tier. I'm gonna give it C tier. This was a passion project of mine, so I really do hope every single one of y'all enjoyed. But I'm not gonna take any more time further from you. Later.
I'm the highwayman.